we're heading to the Highlands with a little Tomatin sherry cask in tow. Distillation is an art form that's been around for thousands of years, and while the basic process is virtually unchanged, the science behind it is quite amazing. We're going to look at where the distilling process came from and how we quite possibly could be in the middle of the most exciting time in whiskey history. Plus, age versus value. Where do you fall into the argument? Is age truly the best indicator of quality? We'll give our take on the topic, so settle in and pour a dram. This is the Cask Chasers Podcast. All right, guys, welcome to the Cask Chasers Podcast. As always, we got Bobby and Aaron here. How you doing, fellas?
Hi.
I am doing well.
And we have an exciting whiskey here for us this week. We have Tomatin single. Is it Highland?
It is.
Highland, yeah.
Yep.
And this was yours, Aaron. Brought
It
this
was.
in?
Yeah.
Talk about it.
So I had not tried this one before, strangely enough. And Tomatin is how I heard it said, but Tomatin, I don't know. So it's a.
Don't worry,
it's
they'll
a
give us
Highland.
corrections.
That's right.
Somebody's
gonna podcast at caskchasers.org.
Idiots.
So it's one of these. Initially I like the bottle. I mean, we all know I'm a bottle chaser. Let's say it together. But it's a 12-year-old. It was. I was looking around. I was like, I want some more scotches in my collection. I'm kind of reeling after the holidays and, not having a whole lot of extra money to spend. And if I recall, it was around, $40-ish, somewhere in there. And I was like, I need to get some more scotches. And I hadn't tried this one. So I got it and I tried it and I liked it. So I wanted to share it with you gents.
And what did you say it was? How much?
Around 40, if I
not
recall.
bad.
No,
For
no.
Scotch.
And
Yeah.
that's
For
the
Highland?
thing. Yeah.
Holy crap,
12 years old, Highland, bourbon and sherry casks. So, I mean.
Typical.
Yeah. And generally, I'm not an enormous fan of a sherry cask. There's a couple here or there. I'm more of a fan of like a port cask. But this particular one I really enjoyed. And maybe that's just because I've been.
Well, you don't like sherry bombs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I don't like really heavy sherry. So, I mean, this one's just got sort of, more of a little bit of a taste of it. And I feel like it's got some decent complexity. Highland is my favorite region.
Yeah.
It's just so big and there's so much of it. Some of the islands are technically part of the Highlands. So, I wanted to give her a go.
There's no peat in this, so Scott's done with it.
I'm already.
Scott's like, what is this, water?
Yeah, my bar is very low right now. All right, shall we?
Let's do it.
Cheers,
do it.
fellas.
So I want you guys to talk first because.
Well, it's 43, right?
Yep.
43 ABV.
Yep. He said
So,
confidently without looking at it.
I
Yep.
know. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Look at that. I did look earlier. I'm not that good.
cheater.
You know
Come
what I
on.
mean?
We're giving
They
you too
wouldn't
much
have known
credit. We're giving
either.
you too much credit, man.
43.6, I believe, if I'm
right,
going
that's
off my palate.
I tell you what, that guy's.
It's not hot, which is
No.
I didn't expect it to be. It's really clean.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
I added no water to it, but it almost has
Yeah.
a crispness to it.
And as I was taking
Crisp.
it in, that's when the vanilla hit me. Right.
Yeah.
As I was drinking but breathing it in,
Yeah.
I got the vanilla there, but
That's
then
where I
I
get
didn't
it.
get it afterwards. And almost like a dried fruit as I'm tasting it.
So this has a lot of, to me, it has a lot of flavors that you find in a lot of bourbons. So you said the vanilla. I taste a little bit of a caramel almost. There's almost a on the palate. There's almost like a citrus type thing.
I was going to say,
and that's probably
almost like
yeah, and I think that's what your taste, that sort of clear or
Yeah.
clean taste that you were talking about.
Fresh.
There. Yeah, fresh. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. So I almost exactly, almost like a citrus fruit. Maybe not quite an orange, but like lemony.
this
to
would
me.
be good lunchtime whiskey.
Oh, that's a
good lunchtime whiskey.
That's a great idea.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
For all the
just-
alcoholics
That's
out
right.
there.
Just leave
On
work.
our next show, we'll talk about breakfast whiskeys and
Middle of the
whiskeys-
night refrigerator whiskeys.
and whiskeys for when you're sad.
I mean, if you look at our track record, we're starting with it's would you steal it? Would you leave work
Right,
and
yeah,
drink it all the time?
I would not steal this.
Right.
because the price point alone isn't worth whatever that crime.
So to me, this has that brightness that you were talking about, that sort of clean taste. There's almost a little bit to me of like I always call it like a dark dried fruit, like a raisin or like a almost like a prune. Almost?
I would start somebody on this.
Yeah,
if I had a new, you know what I mean.
Exactly.
So here's what I dig about 12-year whiskeys, scotches, specifically scotches, only scotches really, is no oak. Right, you're not getting that until later. It's been stripped away by the bourbon. And so you got to really get an old one. I think 15, 18 years is typical when you start tasting the oak in a scotch. So there's none of that oak. It's all fruit. It's all floral. Like you said, the citrus, really bright. I would give this to I would enjoy this, right? I would give like a picnic or a lunch or middle of the day, noon, now, whenever. In the bathroom. I would have it anywhere. But
Tomatin in the morning, Tomatin in the evening.
I can't wait for this editing. He's going to be like, cutting that. I would share this with somebody for the first time.
Yeah.
I think I would add this to my list of, hey, you're new to scotch.
Right.
As a seasoned scotch drinker, it just ends. And no finish.
No. And I was actually going to come back to talk about the finish.
Before I interrupted you?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's fine. No, so the finish, it's short. You still feel a little bit going on your tongue, sort of like later on, but it's not. It's almost like it's got a little bit of that sort of numbing that happens to the tongue. I taste a little bit of somewhere right before the palate and the finish, like right in between there, I get almost this butterscotchy type note, and then I get like maybe something that's a little appley, and then nothing. So I mean, it does have a very short finish, and I mean it's
pretty typical.
Yeah, exactly.
For a young scotch,
yeah,
and not in a bad way.
Yeah, I know you said that weren't expecting peat in this, but do you get a little hint of a smokiness to it on the end? Because I feel like it's not overwhelming, but I feel like I get just a hint of smoke or.
I'm willing to try it again to see. I'm not finding.
I'm no quitter, so I'll try it again.
But on the nose, while you guys are tasting, on the nose, I get I said the dry fruit, but to me, have you ever dried out like bananas or anything in the dehydrator?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And you pull that tray open, and that's like that's what it reminded me of right away.
I don't know about this one at all, and I'd have to look into it more. Most your scotches aren't. The grains aren't dried with hot air like Irish whiskeys
right,
are.
right.
It's typically peat or something, even if it's a low amount. So you could be getting it from that. I'm not tasting it, but that's not to say it's not there.
I mean, and after you said it, I kind of got a little bit of it, but I don't know if that's completely mental.
You're in our heads now.
I'm searching for
See how I do it?
Get out of my head.
It's like drying out
Puppet
bananas.
Master.
Yeah, jeez. I like it. It's a good one. I'd put that on my shelf.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
At that price point.
For the price point, you can't beat it.
And and I'll just say this: if you're a Scotch drinker and you have friends that aren't, which is the point of everything we do, is to bring
absolutely
people that don't know with people that do know. You should have something on your shelf that everybody can grab. Because I'll go to people's houses that I know that are really big Scotch whiskey drinkers, and they don't have anything I would share with a new drinker. And I'm thinking it'd be nice if you had something cool, calm, and collect. That's what I would put on my shelf.
That's an excellent point. And our hope is that with this show, there's a lot of new people to whiskey, and we've already recommended that the Glenmoe is one place to start. And if you want to go Highlands, this is a.
I mean, if you're listening now and you're not new to whiskey, you need to stop listening because this is not. No, I'm just kidding.
This is not for you.
No, but and I would say that as well. And in my cabinet, literally, I have this right next to the Glenmoe G10. Just. Again,
they're kind of friends.
They're buddies, but if you have somebody that's not really into whiskey, maybe into bourbon, not so much into Scotch, it's a nice easy one to get them started.
And it's an attractive bottle.
Yeah, yes. I like the bottle.
I like that style. Yeah.
Does that surprise you that Aaron brought an attractive bottle?
No, I don't know that he owns anything that's not.
I do too.
He snubs it. Remember the Rip Van Winkle?
Yes.
We had it's a pretty unimpressive bottle. He's like, I hate the bottle.
Yep.
So don't drink it, I guess.
That whiskey didn't stand a chance.
He threw it away.
From sight alone, that whiskey didn't stand a chance. Come on. Have you guys had a chance to see our charity video or podcast trailer? If you haven't, you really need to check out the amazing work from our friend John Morgera and Pure Genius Pictures. Whether you're looking for corporate videos, commercials, digital films, and much more, Pure Genius Pictures has you covered at an affordable rate. And the cinema quality work in these videos is incredible. The only thing better is John's attention to detail and his love for the art. Don't believe me? Head on over to our social media pages and check out our videos for yourself. Or better yet, head on over to YouTube and search Pure Genius Pictures for a sampling of their work. If wedding bells are in your future, PGP Wedding Films will make sure your special day is turned into the perfect memory your family will look back on for years to come. For corporate or private video, check them on the web at puregeniusfilms.com. And for wedding videography, you can check them out at pgpweddings.com. When it comes to professional videography, let John and his team at Pure Genius Pictures turn your next event into pure genius. And be sure to tell them the Cash Chaser sent you. All right, fellas. Well, we've talked about Scotch. We've talked about bourbon. We've gone all over the world, talked about where whiskey came from in different regions. But we haven't really talked about just where whiskey comes from in general. How is it made? Because when you look at all the regions that we've talked about to this point, there's a lot of similarities in the distillation process, right? The basic science of it, the history of where it came from, there's some commonality there. And then each region has something that makes it their own. But distillation in general, where does that come from? How did that come to be? Because that is an amazing process when you think about it. I don't know.
Tell us, Scott.
We'll talk to you next
week. Look it up. Shoot us an email.
Well,
Mesopotamia, right?
Yeah. So you have, to summarize it really short, I guess. You have monks that they're traveling, in Greece. They're traveling in Rome, which isn't Rome at the time, whatever it is, and Europe, right? Mm-hmm. And they're seeing perfumes and oils being created through what is distillation. So they basically do that with their beer. Is a simple explanation. Right. Now, there's some, stories out there of the same thing happens, and a common thing for Scotland and Ireland is a bowl of mush oatmeal, right? Grained oatmeal that they will continue each morning to reprocess. Beer would come from that. You distill that, you get a whiskey from it, or you get a new wine from it.
Sure.
Moonshine. So that's probably where it started. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a loose translation, but it probably came from, perfume and oil makers. Yeah. And then somehow we decided, how can we drink that? So what's interesting about that, smell came first.
That doesn't surprise me, right?
You know what I mean?
Because like you said, the original point was aromatics. It was not for consumption, but at some point, it makes me smile that at some point in history, some guy went and then took a sip.
I wonder if I could drink this.
Yeah. So distilling, the process of distilling is just a purification of a liquid, with the combination of heating and cooling, and that. I mean, that's a really, really sort of dumbed down version of it. But I mean, you can distill water by boiling a pot of it and catching the vapors mm-hmm. on the pot lid. So when you distill any liquid, you've got the part that is distilled, and you've got the stuff that's left, and it's basically you have some of these whiskeys that are double distilled, triple distilled, all these different things. And that's how many times they go through that specific process. And at some point we can talk about the different sizes and styles of stills, what the benefits are, and that sort of thing.
Well, they would start with basic small copper pot stills.
Yes.
I mean, you see these as far back as pictures go,
mm-hmm.
photographs go, literally, 5-gallon, 3-gallon pot stills, a neck coming up into a barrel, and they're, distilling it. And your Irish triple distill, Scotch typically double.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to find what we call the heart. So we were talking about heads, heart, and tails. So the head of it, what's dangerous about making whiskey, because I've made beer.
Right.
If you have a kitchen and a pot, you can make beer. There's so many home brewers out there. And I've had people that know I'm, really into whiskey. They say, have you ever tried making whiskey? And I said, no, because I don't want to die. Like my grandpappy did, going blind out in West Virginia. You know what I mean? It's because the head of it, and one of the things too, and there was a term, taking a shot, essentially, that came from, back when they were making whiskey. It was dangerous. It was a game. It was roulette,
right?
Because you tasted the head first, and that was methanol, which is poisonous. And then the tail, too far into the new whiskey, this is it coming off the still itself, is bitter and funky. There's that middle part called the heart. That's the stuff you want. That's the flavorful stuff.
Okay.
So you literally, now we have science and ways to do it. And they still, some of the old school
I mean, they had
methods.
science.
Well, he's dead. That's not the one we want. So
write that down somewhere.
You know what I mean? So you're literally, but you can tell by the glass. You'll see Scotch distillers, and other distillers do it as well. They'll literally take it, add water to it, and if it stays cloudy and the cloud doesn't fade into a crystal clear, water look, it's not ready yet.
Right.
So they're tasting it, they're smelling it, they're scientifically testing it to make sure that heads become a heart. You can't do anything with the heads. You can do everything with a heart. That's the point. And then the tails, you can use that for distillation later. Some do, some don't. Some just dump it. But that's what's cool about the distillation process is finding. It's not just taking the vapors. So alcohol, it boils off first before water does.
Right.
And so you catch the alcohol vapors. Goes up the neck, cools off, drips into the container you're catching it in, and then you're tasting it.
Yep.
You distill it a second time, and maybe a third if you're Irish. And that's how smooth you want it, or how the lack of flavor.
You're referring to the process.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I mean intelligence.
Just the Irish in general.
Well, Irish whiskey is triple distilled,
right? Exactly,
and that's why you don't taste.
They're just really nervous people. They got
one more,
maybe one more time. Yeah. Maybe we do this again
before we taste it.
But so you get, but there's an art of balancing more flavor, less flavor. How many times you distill it, you start getting more of the ethanol that you want. Versus the flavors that you want, the grain, you took all that time to peat and smoke and dry.
Sure.
And, you want to catch as much as you can. So there's definitely a science to it.
Sure. And I mean, like you were alluding to, the whole thing's a balancing act. It's
of death and life.
Of death and life, literally in some situations. But it's a whole balancing act. If you go too far with it, you're getting rid of some of the flavors that maybe you wanted previously, and it's just I'm flabbergasted time and time again when I hear the distillers talking just the science behind it and the chemistry and all this kind of stuff.
Well, most are chemists,
and that's the thing. That's the ridiculous thing to me. Like, most times I feel like I'm just some guy drinking this stuff and like, man, this one's good, Yeah.
But then you think about your great grandfather, Aaron specifically,
specifically my great grandfather,
out in the woods, moonshining. Scotland, they did it. Ireland, America, obviously, and these were not scientists. Somebody's dad's dad passed this down, and they're out there, doing this stuff. Now you have chemists sitting in, and people that know.
It's amazing. And one of the things that always catches my eye is when you look back, if you're researching history of distillation of whiskey, and you look at the pictures of the old stills, and they're really not that different from what you see today.
No.
And the fact that is just, God, we've talked about the beauty and simplicity with whiskey sometimes, and just from that aspect alone, how the science really hasn't changed, the baseline science.
The understanding of it.
And that's a great point too.
So amazing.
Yeah, the understanding of it, the things that we're able to apply now because we know. So you were talking about my great grandpappy or whatever.
I didn't know him, so
that's
I
right.
didn't
That's
offend
okay.
him.
Well, neither did I. You're a lot of your moonshiners, your guys in the glens in Scotland and all that. It was a lot of what we now today. We've got all of these whiskeys, to choose from. Like I literally couldn't even tell you, is it thousands, is it millions? I don't know.
Billions.
There's all these quadrillions of whiskey we have to choose from these days. That's probably it.
Sounds technical.
It's there was so much with somebody's great grandpappy and things that were sort of happened upon accidentally.
Yeah.
That's not just the distillation. That's everything. That's your barrels. You used barrels to transport stuff. Guess what? Oh, barrels impart great flavor to the whiskey and all this. It's just things that came not necessarily by accident, but out of necessity. We have to get this thing from this place to this place. It's on there for, a couple months. Oh, wow, this makes it taste a whole lot better. Yeah. So that's just sort of that's one of the themes that I've seen. And, there some of your, different distilleries, especially a lot of your smaller guys have started working with breweries, and like taking either beers that didn't really do too well or that did so and distilling those. And while they set out with a purpose, like, hey, we're gonna make a whiskey or something like a whiskey out of this beer or this what could have been a beer, we are sort of just kind of seeing what happens.
And just so everyone knows, and to backtrack just a little bit, you made a great point. Where whiskey comes from, it's a grain. And I'm going to really dumb this down for the people that don't know. It's a grain. It's allowed to sprout to give it the sugar start to come out and things like that when they first start that process. They grind that up. They make a flour out of it. They take that flour and they make a beer, a distiller's beer, typically 7 to 10% ABV, something like that. Yeah. And then they take that beer and they distill it. And there's a lot more to that and verbiage and stuff in there that, to that process. And I would suggest, you'll hear it on our show and pick up a book, watch a video and read about it too. There's a lot of great information out there, but that's the basics. So whiskey comes from beer and comes from a grain. So when you're distilling, you're trying to maintain those flavors. So it's not just about making ethanol. It's not vodka where you're trying to get it as clean and non-flavorful. Exactly. You really do want to make a whiskey, make a liquor, right? But you want to maintain as much of that. And then the pot still itself, the copper is adding flavor and doing its own things. And I just think that's amazing. Yeah. To your point, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's good because I was running out of steam anyway.
Running out of vapor. And it all comes around.
Hey, yo.
That's a distillation joke, kids.
We're nerds.
But at the end of the day, it really is. I'm like I said, I'm just constantly blown away by how stuff happens, and how to your point, how much the distillers just know these days.
Oh my God.
Like I'll stand there and I'll talk with any number of distillers, and just the amount of knowledge they have, not just about Bobby, you have just so much knowledge of like the history and that sort of thing. And, I'm really into tasting and finding those, like real fine points and like, oh, what's this thing I'm tasting? And sometimes I come up with chocolate chip cookies. But it just like when they start talking the actual science of it and the just the chemistry, they really are just talking a different language.
Think about like with the Alta. I mean, finding a wild yeast strand,
right?
And Saccharomyces. I brutalized that, but essentially there's a yeast that's standard among whiskey and beer makers. I mean, they vary. But to just think outside the box and is there a different strand of yeast I can use?
Right.
To make this taste different. There's your science.
Yeah.
That's literally the molecular level.
And you've got a lot of distilleries also that are innovative in sort of going back to older ways of doing stuff as well. And that's sort of what that was.
Their great grandpappies did.
Right. That's what their great grandpappies did. And there's a number of distilleries now that are, cultivating wild yeast strands. To sort of, replicate that as well, because we didn't have all these standardized things, back when your monks first started distilling stuff and this and that. And it's just really neat to me. It's a great time to be a whiskey lover. Really.
Now, unless you have a license, it's illegal to make whiskey in most places in the United States.
Yes.
Can I talk about something non-whiskey related real quick?
Sure.
Do you guys mind?
No,
and this has
for it.
nothing to do with whiskey.
Okay.
I'm done talking about whiskey. I don't want to talk about it anymore. If you're into essential oils, you can buy a still online made of copper.
Yes, you can.
And that copper still will distill your oils for you. And you can create some great oils that you can bottle and hand out to friends. And just be careful when you're distilling your oils,
Think of all the aromatics that you can have in your house. It's amazing.
From, I don't know, any ingredient, really.
Any mash.
Okay, back to whiskey.
That's true.
Right.
That's very true, though.
Now that we talked about that completely unrelated to whiskey. Oh, Lord.
ATF is kicking in.
Any complaints?
Y'all telling people to make whiskey. No.
Send an email to podcast@castchasers.org.
Specifically said aromatics.
Yes.
Yeah. But you can get that stuff. When you go into a distillery and you see, the first time I went into one, I was actually blown away by how little there was in there. Meaning the equipment, in my mind, before I knew anything about it, I'm thinking, man, it must take this massive operation to do something like this on a mass scale.
Right.
And going back to my earlier point, they really stick to the basics and relatively little equipment. I'm not trying to minimize it, but compared to your expectations.
But think about that.
What they're able to do.
You're doing this in the woods.
Exactly.
And the laws are chasing you.
Exactly.
Right.
And the fact that hasn't changed from backwoods to professional distilleries, that's amazing.
Don't get him wrong. There's labs and stuff.
Yeah. I mean there's a lot more, but I'm talking about just the heart and soul of the operation, right? The actual stills and everything. It's still back to the roots of it all. And it's a beautiful thing to me. There's a couple things I want to touch on with the actual stills, right?
Yep.
And one of you guys was telling me about the height. And there's a difference in the different heights, right? The column.
So there's maybe Aaron, I'm not sure. So there are different kinds of stills used. Obviously, there's column stills, which have their own. There are platelets that go in between. There's a whole science to that. There's pot stills, which are traditional in Scotland and Ireland, and obviously in Scotland. There's theories behind if there's dents inside in the still itself, the flavor will change. And people have I've asked people and they said, yeah, the molecular structure of the dents, and then people have said no, it's has nothing to do. So there's arguments. That taller, it's that finite, get it right kind of thing. There are really tall, and I can't remember who has the tallest, the goose or the swan neck.
Is it Glenmorangie?
It might be. I think they may have the tallest. That amount of time that vapor has to travel up that long neck, right? Intermingle with the copper and everything it's doing in that travel, entering the cooling section where it curves, right, and then turning back into liquid. That changes an entire flavor process without taking away from anything that you're trying to get. I think you get to your heart a little quicker with that, and it has time to take a lot of the other bad stuff out of it. But so as things haven't changed, playing around with the tools you have. It's almost like watching. You ever watch Top Chef or Chopped?
Oh, yeah.
When they here's a basket of 4 ingredients, make something. Right. Whiskey's like that. Like you have to make it the way your granddaddy did. You know what I mean? Here's your pot still. Here's your grain. Here's your water. Good luck. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But no one says you can't change it.
Right.
Make it.
Right.
If I stretch it, is it better? If I, what if I? And now we have column stills that aren't even, totally different science behind those things. That's a different show. But it's crazy what they can do with these things now, and to extract different flavors from that process.
And when you look back through history, it's also amazing to me that as that process became defined, you can see you can see how whiskey as a commodity grows, and going from King Henry IV gifting it away to King Henry VIII making it almost a currency and monetizing that for
medicine.
Yeah. And then you kind of fast forward to.
I'm so sick.
What do you have? I don't know, a sore throat. Just can we get the whiskey? And there's a movement today with whiskey. So, some people's dismay, there's flavored whiskeys and stuff coming out. There's all kinds of people are actually experimenting with the whiskeys themselves now. But even then, the process isn't changing much. They're still doing it the way So how do you? Aaron said there's a 2.6 trillion types of whiskey out there. How do you differentiate yourself from others? You know what I mean? Yeah. So now you're forced almost, if you want to be different, you mix with the grain, but sometimes it's that small level. And some of the coolest whiskeys I've ever had have come from just a different kind of pot still, just the way they do it, the way they distill it, and that's the genius of a master, a true master distiller. Yeah.
You alluded to it. If it was legal, would you do your own?
You know what? No. Because whiskey is it's not like art. It is an art, and I believe it is. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But it is like art where it's part of you. You have to have that, I think.
Sure.
But there's also a heritage there and a love for it. And I have a love for whiskey and a passion, but I appreciate what other people do. I don't have this secret handbook passed down from generation to generation telling me what the right way is. I would be interested in trying. I'm really scared of methanol. I'm really worried about finding you know what I mean?
Data, I tried. I'm sorry.
He's blind now. I don't think I could do what these guys are doing, and I don't want to, I don't want to try.
I have a bunch of friends in the beer world who do the home brewing, and I have a few friends that do professional brewing. And one of the things that they go back and forth on is, I if I can't do it justice, I don't want to do it on my own just for fun, right?
Yeah,
and I know that's what you're alluding to.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And for me, I thought about that because I said, man, if I could make my own whiskey, that sounds like a lot of fun. But after thinking about it, if I can't, I don't want to just get ingredients in the mail or get ingredients from the store and put them in a pot. Like if I can't do the due diligence up front and
if you take the time,
my malt, get my,
you might as well become a distiller,
right? Yeah,
if you're meeting the farmer, you know what I mean. You're taking the science, you know what I mean. You might as well.
But if I can't do that, then I don't want to because otherwise, I'm just. It just seems cheap to me.
And I'll be honest with you, and I know you guys pretty well. We don't have the patience.
That's true.
No.
That's very
when
true.
you make your own beer, you have time. You sick maybe a few months, right? But with whiskey, I can't put something in there and be like, all right, so I guess 3 years.
That's right, 3 years.
I'm opening that up the next day. Is this ready, you think?
I feel like we've had this conversation a lot, is that I can't imagine laboring away at something, whether even not just whiskey, wine, you name it. Anything, laboring away at this thing and then having to wait.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
right. Just
years,
sit there.
10 years, 12 years. Can you imagine? And in some cases, getting a dry barrel or who knows what you're going to get.
On that, something that upsets me, and I'm going to say it to the listeners out there. When I listen to not whiskey snobs, but whiskey connoisseurs, people that really get into it, they won't drink a young new whiskey. They won't, they see the flavored whiskeys out there, or they see, they're getting their stuff from like MGP or something. They're doing these things, and I'm thinking they want to create a whiskey. Give them the starting line. You know what I mean? You have to start somewhere.
Right.
And, we have a friend that, makes whiskey, and I've had somebody, I'm not going to give his name out, but we had another friend taste it, and they're like, oh, I can't stand it. I'm like, well, it's young, man. Give the guy a chance. You can't, Japanese did the same thing. Yep. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I respect that,
Well, and another thing, just to bounce back to what you were saying, Scott, about, waiting 10 years, waiting 12 years for something. If your whiskey has an age statement, that is the youngest whiskey that's in it.
Oh, good point.
So a 12, like this a 12-year-old Tomatin is going to be at least 12 years old. You might have some 15-year-old in there.
You could have pulled a little 25 off the shelf.
Yeah, there might be some 25 in there, just to try to make it all uniform, just to get that again back to the science, back to the taste, just to get that to be the way it's supposed to be, so that all the bottles are going to be uniform.
Not to dip into another show altogether, but what are your opinions on age statement?
I have. When I started out, I was in search of the oldest one I could afford, because I equated that with
an
quality.
8-year is what you
pretty much. Hey, you're right. But that was my mindset was what's the oldest one I can afford, because I equated that with quality.
Right.
And I've since I backed off of that, and I have not been disappointed. I still chase the older ones once in a while.
Some are good, and they're a good measuring tool, but I don't dive into that pool. We had the Abalor, Abu Dhabi, and that, oh my gosh, and that's a non-age statement. It's fairly young, actually. It's not an old whiskey.
Right. So, and I'm more or less right where Scott is. Now, if I see, you know, like a 30-year-old or something like that,
I'm stealing
and
it.
so I'm stealing. Good Lord. Podcast at castchasers.org. If I see if somebody's going to let me have a taste of a 30-year-old, I'm already like, wow, okay, you know, like buckle your seatbelt. And very often it is something where I'm like, wow, that's.
Yeah.
There's, you know, there's something about it that's, you know, a lot of it's, you know, sort of rounding those harsh edges by it just, you know, aging
sometimes
for longer.
Sometimes it's too much oak, though.
And sometimes it is. Exactly.
You know,
sometimes it goes too far.
It loses some stuff.
Exactly. So sometimes it goes too far, too much oak, too much this, too much that. But no, I'm not bound to, like, if I see, you know, a 12-year and a 14-year on a shelf, and I've had them both before, sometimes that 12 years better.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not or the 14's not worth it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a decent amount of non-age statement stuff. And again, age statements are mostly going to be more on your scotches than your American whiskeys.
There's regulated state age.
Yes.
Bourbon and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
We all came together on that one.
Hey,
I thought I was going to have to leave.
It only took a few episodes.
I know. Look at us bonding.
I guess that's it.
I'm done.
There's Distillation.
There's nothing else to talk about.
The Time's Up red light just came on, which means Scott will fire us if we keep talking.
Right. So I'm just going to tell you out there that if you had any corrections for us, you can email us, as Aaron has said, podcast@castchasers.org. We don't expect any, but if you found some. But in all seriousness, you can also
delete it.
Yeah, that's right. But you can send it. That's fine. There is definitely a lot more to talk about around distillation and stills, so I'm sure we'll be circling around to this topic again sooner rather than later. And when we do, we'll be bringing some distillery owners into the studio to give us their first-hand knowledge of the process itself and what their take is on the use of different stills. So be on the lookout for those episodes in the coming months, but in the meantime, we'll have all new episodes coming in just a couple weeks, so be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Cask Chasers for all the updates. Also, let us know what you think of the show. You can comment on any one of our pages or email us at podcast@castchasers.org. If you want to help support the Cask Chasers podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review to help us spread the word. There is nothing more valuable. So until next time, Cask Chasers, remember, it's not about finding the perfect dram, it's all in the chase.